So let's raise the big questions tonight. Is the West Asia conflict now in danger of widening even further? Is there a growing divide now within the Islamic world? Is Iran's bid really to drag in America into the conflict by opening new areas of conflict? What role will the US and, more crucially for us, China play? China is already saying that they are ready to play truce between Iran and Pakistan. I'm joined by Michael Kugelman, Director, South Asia Institute, the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., K.C. Singh, former Secretary at the MEA, Rizwan Nasir, Strategic Security Analyst, joined me from Pakistan, Andrew K.P. Lewing, China Strategist and Analyst from Hong Kong. Let me come first to you, Rizwan, there, because Pakistan finds itself now opening up a new conflict with Iran, retaliatory strikes today. Is there a fear that this could spread, or is this very limited and localized?
Well, Rajdeep, this is very well calculated, and Pakistan is well aware of this. At this point, when there was a huge pressure from Pakistan's people, that Pakistan's people were actually reacting to the Iranian strike. Actually, this was more an internal pressure than the external one. So just to meet that, if I recall that time, when Salalah checkpost was attacked by the NATO in 2011, when Brahmos came in Pakistan, and then now this time Iranian, Pakistani people were demanding something meaningful. It should be retaliated. It was demand from inside. So that is why Army, Pakistan military took this action. And yes, it is once again the retaliation of the Iranian strike deep into Pakistan territory.
But you're saying it's a retaliatory strike. What the Iranians are saying is they are carrying out strikes against terror outfits based in Balochistan, which they claim have been Sunni terror groups which have been operating out of Pakistan and targeting Iran.
Yes, this is a long 900 kilometers border. In 900 kilometers, everyone knows that there are real issues of smuggling, real issues of the terrorist hideouts. They are operating from this side and the other side. And if you know that on the other side, there are BLA as well, which Pakistan targeted. And that is quite common in South Asian geopolitics. This is common. India supporting BLA, Pakistan supporting. This is actually a geopolitical game which is going on in here. So I would like to say that all of the countries, they were coordinating. They have proxies here. This is unfortunate.
No, but the fact is that Rizwan, Pakistan finds itself in the crosshairs of being accused now by Iran also of sponsoring and supporting terror groups that are being used to target Iranian territory. Now, we've seen this India has made this charge on cross-border terror in the past. The Afghans have made charges against the way Pakistan territory has been used, or Pakistan has trained terror groups, and now you've got the Iranians. So Pakistan, in a way, has to make it clear, are you sponsoring Sunni terrorist groups or not?
Listen, if I recall the Canadian and Indian tensions, why are they going on? Because of the similar reason. I want to tell you, there is an internal reason as well. For me, being a Pakistani, I'm concerned this is a failure of Pakistan's foreign policy. Yes, I agree with you. One side, India was a tension. On the other side, another border, western border, Afghanistan became a tension, and we deployed troops over there. Now, Iranian side, for me, being Pakistani, it's a failure of foreign policy. We should mediate. We should actually, the things should be discussed on the table by negotiations, not by striking back. And especially, this also has some internal ramifications. Some political analysts, they believe that this kind of thing is happening because in Pakistan, the election is due in February. If this kind of things is happening, the people will be more deviated from the internal politics to external one. And that could also be a reason why this military conflict is actually, once again, it's taking a new shape.
Let me bring in K.C. Singh. K.C. Singh, your first thoughts on what you're seeing. This seems prima facie a bit of a surprising escalation. Or do you believe that given all that has been happening in Iran, you're not surprised?
Rajdeep,
we are not surprised.
Yes, K.C. Singh, go ahead. K.C. Singh, Rizwan, just a minute. K.C. Singh, go ahead.
There are two things. Firstly, there are about 2 million Baluchis in Iran, and there are about 7 million Baluchis in Pakistan. So each side has been using the Baluchis and the other one to go after each other. Iranians feel Pakistanis have been using Jaish-e-Adl, this particular group, to create the separatist feeling in the Baluchi part of Iran. Then the Iranians probably retaliate by giving shelter to the Baluchis of Balochistan. So this has been going on for many years. This is nothing new. once, in fact, a lot of IRGC officials were killed many years ago. But this particular strike should be taken in a larger context because there were 3 strikes by Iran. It wasn't one strike, and they emanate from the suicide bombing in Kerman, which took place on the death anniversary of Qasem Soleimani. There was a large crowd there, and almost 50, 60 people died, for which ISIS took the credit. So therefore, the Iranians went after 3 targets. They went after targets in northern Syria, which were ISIS. They went after Erbil, the capital of the Kurdish province in Iraq, because they said there is a Mossad Israeli office there which is responsible. And they went after this Baluchi group, because I think their impression is that these 3 were jointly involved in this particular. So ISIS, the Jaish-e-Adl, as well as the Israelis were somehow coordinating this particular suicide bombing. And therefore, they went after 3 targets. So it's not just Pakistan. I think this will settle down. The Chinese are close to both the countries. They would not want this to escalate. Each one has had a face saver. They've done their bit. But for Iran, it was not a standalone attack on Pakistan. That's the limited point that we must keep in mind.
Michael Kugelman, your first reactions. Do you agree with KC Singh that this is essentially both sides have launched these strikes on each other, but you do not expect this to escalate in any manner?
Yes, I would agree. I mean, it's harder to read what could be coming next from the Iranian side, and that's what we have to be looking at the next few days. But I think from the perspective of Pakistan, they've got several good reasons not to want more escalations. One is they have so much internal turmoil, as you know, the economic stress, the political crisis, a resurgence of terrorism emanating from across another border in Afghanistan. So that's one thing. And also, keeping in mind the demographic factors, Pakistan has a Shia population of about 15 to 20% of its total population. It's the second largest Shia community in the world outside of Iran. So I think that for Pakistan, further escalations could pose risks to social stability as well. And indeed, I do think Pakistan would be receptive to mediation from China. And I agree that China, if there's any country that would be in a position to be an effective mediator, it's China. Iran may be a bit tougher to bring it around, but let's remember, just 2 years ago, Iran and China signed a 25-year partnership agreement, a strategic accord. Both Iran and Pakistan are heavily dependent on China for economic support. That gives Beijing leverage here. So I do think that in due course, we could expect China to have some success in getting the 2 sides to de-escalate. But, tensions are high, temperatures are high. Both of the countries hit by these attacks said that children were killed. So, given that, you can't expect de-escalation today. But I'd like to hope that cooler heads will prevail in the coming days, particularly with China there to try to get both sides to step away from the cliff.
And Andrew Leung, we've heard about both KC Singh and Michael Kugelman suggesting that China could well play the role of peacemaker, given Chinese interests both in Iran and Pakistan. Do you see China now playing a proactive role to ensure this doesn't escalate further?
Well, the success of China in brokering the historic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran suggests that China is well positioned to broker peace in the Middle East. And of course, a peaceful Middle East is in every way in China's interest, bearing China's Belt and Road Initiative and other things. Above all, when the Muslim community has never been so united over Gaza, the last thing the Muslim community wants is a fracture with its own camp. So I think that for China, there is every advantage to broker a peace. And then as far as Iran is concerned, I don't think that Iran wants to escalate either. It's not in Iran's interest, because Iran is now riding on the crest of its increasing influence over with the rapprochement with Saudi Arabia, but also with even in the war on Gaza. So I think that Iran again doesn't want another thing, that the stumbling block.
Right.
But I think that this has happened because of some reflex action, and think that this could have been prevented if there was a sort of a telephone call in advance or negotiations in advance. But unfortunately, that's what's happened. But I don't think that escalation is in any party's interest in this game. And of course, it's in China's interest to see a peaceful situation returning to that part of the world.
Casey Singh, all of this is coming on the back of what we've seen over the last 100 days in Gaza, and also the fact that we are seeing an escalation of a potential conflict across the region, which could bring in Lebanon, which could bring in Yemen, has already dragged in Yemen in a way. And Iran, many believe, is playing an increasingly influential role within radical Islamic societies. Do you see Iran's focus, therefore, primarily being on establishing a domineering presence in the Middle East and West Asia? What happened in Pakistan is not going to actually influence their main concern, which is exercising their sphere of influence in West Asia and the Middle East.
Absolutely correct. They've taken up the cause of the Palestinians right from the first, when the Islamic Revolution came in 1979. Right from that point, they've been anti-Israel. So this is part of their basic DNA of the Islamic government. So they feel that they've got Israel on the back foot. They would apply the pressure. Hezbollah is being restrained. I think Israel has been told that with an army of almost 100,000 men and with a tunneling system, which the North Koreans have helped them create in southern part of Lebanon, even the Americans have warned Israel that if you start something with Hezbollah, it's going to be much more expensive and much worse than their previous fighting with Hezbollah some years ago. So therefore, Iran would like to use their surrogates. They do come out in front like they did in the Red Sea when they found the Houthis were getting attacked. So they sent one naval vessel there, which couldn't do much to counter the Americans, but it was a symbolic presence there. So they would continue to use the Houthis. They would continue to cause the pain by increasing the freight and the insurance rates. And sooner or later, it will start affecting the food supplies, other supplies going into Israel. And that is their game. They would like to extend it.
So in a way,
to the point where Israel is forced to call a halt in Gaza.
Right.
They can't keep killing. They've gone to the southern part of Gaza now where most of the refugees are concentrated. How long can they continue their operations there? That is the issue. And now with the primaries starting off in America, it starts impacting the public opinion in America. It's already impacting it. President Biden is looking helpless that he can't constrain Israel. And this can't go on the way it is. And we can see the implications. It's something like what Iran has done in retaliation for the suicide bombing in Kerman, that there will be provocations. Any single act can trigger a larger conflagration. And I think the Americans have to tell the Israelis that this has to be brought to a quick end. They can't finish Hamas.
For a moment,
Hamas leadership will remain, and therefore they have to stop the fighting.
Can I just for a moment bring in Michael Kugelman on that? Michael Kugelman, is the real fear that America, Washington has, is this increasingly assertive Iran, particularly post what's been happening in Gaza, which is once again trying to assert its influence across the region. We're seeing what's happening in Yemen, and the fear is they will use the Hezbollah, if necessary, as their sword arm to further their influence in the region. And therefore, what's happening with Pakistan is not really the real issue. The real issue is what Iran does with America.
Absolutely. This is the U.S. fear. I mean, there's a lot happening in the Middle East, significant levels of destabilization. It's very complex. A lot of it is hard to make sense of. But if there is one common denominator, it's that a number of these violent actors that are causing these provocations are sponsored by Iran. And this is clearly very concerning for the United States. And this increasingly has economic and commercial impacts, given what the Houthis are doing, which of course prompted the U.S. to put together this military coalition to counter that. But yes, it's easy to forget these days that when the Biden administration first came to power, it was keen to try to improve relations with Iran. But those days are long gone. And I think you have to look back at the geopolitical context that long predates the beginning of the war in Gaza. Iran, for a long time, has been very concerned about recent developments, especially the Abraham Accords concluded during the Trump administration, which led to Israel concluding peace deals with a number of countries in the region, including some Arab Gulf states. this is very serious for Iran. This is one of the reasons why it's been doubling down on its support for these proxies, which is clearly something that's very worrisome for the U.S. and its allies and partners. So, yeah, indeed, this is I would argue that the U.S.-Iran relationship, it's been a long time since it's been as confrontational as it is now, and Tehran is very happily, or not happily, but is very willingly using asymmetric tactics such as proxy war to hit out at the United States and its allies, which again is very concerning for the Biden administration.
Is that therefore, Michael Kugelman, something that you think could worsen in the months ahead? This is a U.S. presidential election year as well. Iran will see this as a moment to flex its muscles and put America on the mat?
Yes, perhaps. I mean, I do think that as long as the war in Gaza continues, that ensures that Iran will continue to double down on what it's been doing with backing these proxies. And of course, that puts the U.S. in a tough spot because, as you know, the U.S. support for Israel throughout this war has started to have some domestic political impacts in terms of, recent surveys showing that key constituencies for the Democratic Party have been expressing a lot of unhappiness about this U.S. position. But yeah, I don't see why Iran would try to pull back, though honestly, the more it does it, the more reckless it gets. And, in the case of the crisis with Pakistan, Pakistan was not an enemy of Iran's. They had a delicate relationship. There was a history of cross-border tensions, but Pakistan, it wanted to be a friend of Iran's, even as it privileged its partnership with Saudi Arabia. Iran cannot afford to alienate another country at a moment when it's facing so much vulnerability and threats to its security around the region. So, to me, this is something that could backfire for Tehran.
Mr. Lewing, the fear I think that is being expressed is you've got a China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan axis, or China, Pakistan, and then you've got a China, Russia, Iran axis building up. But you're dealing with a country which many believe is reckless, which is supporting terror proxies in the region. Is this in China's interest to be playing this card? Is this China also getting into a situation that can spiral out of control?
Well, I think, first of all, it's in China's every interest to see a peaceful Middle East, as I said earlier, because it is an important conduit of oil and energy and other resources for China over land. And China is heavily dependent on that. But as far as the apparent partnership between China, Iran, and Russia, there's not very much of China's doing. Is in fact caused by the American aggressiveness against these three countries, making Russia is an enemy, making China is arch enemy, and of course making Iran is enemy as well by tearing up the peace deal. So I think that pushing these three countries together to form a kind of axis is really Americans doing, and that is fatal to American interests. That's forewarned by Americans' foreign policy doyen, the late Brzezinski, in his China chessboard. I mean, his China chessboard book, and he did warn this kind of fatal alliance, fatal to American interests. Right. But unfortunately, that's what the Americans has been successful in doing.
You're putting the ball in the American court, while Iran, which has been exporting this terror, also needs to be looked at with, the scrutiny needs to also be on Tehran. But Rizwan, I want to understand, in Islamabad, is there growing anger against Iran? And the Shia-Sunni conflicts, are they playing out in any way? Is there anger on the streets of Pakistan today against what Iran did yesterday? And is that the reason why Pakistan was virtually forced to retaliate? Surely Pakistan is in no condition to get into any kind of skirmish with Iran.
Well, in Pakistan, there is a huge anger, especially amongst people. People actually wanted a reaction to this. People of Pakistan are very sentimental. When it is any attack on Pakistan soil, Pakistani people question, we have a huge military. Even in the region, we have nuclear weapons. Why don't we react? I mentioned before. Now, in terms of this, when it comes to, you said, the Sunni and Shia, when there are some religious tensions, they are different from political tensions. Well, we need to look them separately. Yes, if this kind of thing happens, when there are attacks on Shia shrines and there are targeted killing of Shias, there is an anger. Right. In Pakistan, on the other side, Iranians, they react to that. And on the other side, if there is an attack on Sunnis, then Pakistanis also react to that. There are two conflicts. One is religious, one is political.
So you're seeing this as a political conflict?
I would like to add one thing here.
Yes.
I would like to add one thing here. Now, Pakistan's army chief visited Washington, D.C. recently, last month. And when he came back, we were trying to follow what has been concluded there. Things were not clear. They were opaque. We could not try to understand. Some of the political commentators, they have an opinion already. When America went to Afghanistan, they needed Pakistan. And now America wants to contain this Iranian influence. Once again, they need Pakistan. This is a cause of concern on some quarters in Pakistan.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting suggestion, which I have a minute to you, KC Singh, to reflect on what Rizwan is saying. Would America use Pakistan to contain Iran?
Well, in this case, the attack has come from Iran first. It's not come from Pakistan. And as I said, both countries have a Baluch problem. It's not that Baluchis are there only in Pakistan and Iran doesn't have them, or the other way around. Each has a problem with their Baluch population, which has separatist elements in it. And they've been supporting each other's separatist elements to contain their own problem. So it's more, I would see it as a Baluch problem, which has spun out of control. Right. I don't think the Americans, the Pakistanis would play this game in this manner in which they start distracting Iran in any way. Because Iran, in any case, is not directly involved in this, nor does Pakistan wants to get directly into a fight with Iran. I think this is just incidental, which has come from the bombing in Kerman. And that's why there were 3 attacks. We should not see the Baluch attack in isolation. Iranians have attacked 3 targets in Syria, in Iraq, and in Balochistan. So we should keep it in context.
Okay, let's leave it there. It's fascinating to see the power play that's playing out at the moment in West Asia, perhaps dragging Pakistan now also in some manner in its crosshairs. Appreciate all my guests joining me to give us a sense to decode these strikes taking place between Iran and Pakistan. Let's come back home and let's turn to the political strikes taking place, because